Let me know if you can still hear me. But we are, like I said, we're gonna start introducing spinal flexion, and to do so, we're gonna do probably the second easiest variation of spinal flexion you can do behind child's pose or knees to chest, but we're gonna do just some lumbar cats. And so we're gonna start flexing your spine. You're gonna be down on hands and knees. You're gonna have your hands underneath your shoulders, knees underneath your hips. And you're just gonna be tucking your pelvis underneath. And we're gonna be going for 10 of these guys. You still hear me okay? Can you check if they can hear me okay? And I'm just tilting and tilting, and we're going for 10. Just loosening up the hips, loosening up the back. We're actually moving our pelvis on top of our femur, our stationary femur, something that we call the closed chain. So we're working on a little bit of hip mobility and spinal mobility as well. Great, I'm glad everybody can hear me. I think I got about 2 left. Then you guys are gonna get to lat or dog. So we're gonna be stretching out our hamstrings, our calves, our glutes, our lats, all things that can contribute to limitations in bending forward. So you're gonna be hands in a high plank position. So you're gonna have hands underneath your shoulders. You're gonna have your feet back in that push-up position. You're gonna pike your butt up, and you're trying to maintain a straight spine. If you have to round a little bit, once again, it's okay. That's kind of the point of today, loosening up the low back. But if you want to bend your knees a little bit, so you can still get a calf stretch, still get a little bit of a hamstring stretch, and then pedal out your feet, this is where we're actually going to go. And we're going to go for 10 reps on each side. If you want, you can straighten out. Like I said, I'm okay with a little bit of rounding in your spine today. We're not picking anything up heavy with that rounded back. I just got back from a run actually before starting this, so this is feeling really, really, really good because my Achilles have been hurting ever since I did a half marathon back in November. I'm trying to stay ahead of that. I think I got about 3 left. Should be feeling pretty good in the back of the legs, trying to keep that back straight. The more anterior tilt that you have in your pelvis, the more of a hamstring and calf stretch you'll probably feel. If you kind of dump and round your low back, you're going to feel a little less stretch. So if you try to maintain that lordosis in your spine, you'll feel a little bit more stretch coming in the hamstring and the calf with that one. If you didn't feel a stretch with that, you'll probably feel it here. We're also going to be able to get a little bit of a stretch, maybe introduce a little bit of tension to your sciatic nerve here with an active straight leg raise, hamstring and calf stretch. I love doing this one on back day. It feels really good. We're going to be on our backs. We're going to be hugging behind one knee. You're going to pull your toes back and then straighten that knee. And we're just going to make 12 on each side. Now if you say, yeah, I feel a pretty good stretch here, but nothing crazy, what you might want to do is go up and turn your foot in towards the midline of your body. So turning your toes towards the opposite side of your body. That might get you a little bit more stretch. Maybe it gives you a little bit of numbness and tingling. I would ask that you avoid that and you just go for the stretch in the back of the leg and the hamstring as well. If you want, maybe get a pause at the top and just pump your toes. See how it feels between being dorsiflexed and plantar flexed. There might be a difference in most of you. I think we got 2 left. And then we're switching sides, and then we're going to use all this newfound flexibility that we have with some, although it looks like I need to find a little bit more flexibility on this side. We're going to use it. We're going to start incorporating our core, our deep spinal stabilizers, our obliques, our abs, our hip flexors, to actively stretch our calves and our hamstrings. It's a really nice day out here. I've got 3 more to go. I'm actually shocked that my dog has not come out here. She seems to always know when I'm laying on the ground. She must be exhausted. Okay. So we've done 12 hamstring and calf stretches on each side. We're going to put our arms down by our side. We're still in the same position, except we're basically going to be doing that same move without our arms. We lift the opposite leg up and then go down. So it's left up, right down, left down. Now we're not trying to peg our spine to the ground, okay? We're actually just trying to stay really stable in our trunk. We don't want to add all that loaded spinal flexion just yet. We just want to stay really, really stable. Think about what you'd be doing if you were doing a plank. And have a little tunnel that a mouse could crawl underneath your low back as you do these. And we're just doing 5 with this pattern, and then we're going to switch. You might also recognize that we're starting to use your hip flexors. And what do we do after we use our hip flexors? We stretch our hip flexors. That I put something in between this and our hip flexor stretch, but I promise it's going to happen pretty quickly. And 5. All right. So we're starting to introduce a hip hinge. We're starting to use our hamstrings, our core, all that stuff. And so now we're going to put it together. We did these guys last week on the long low back, hip, and knee day. We did a hip hinge with a reach to start to stretch out the posterior aspect of our leg, incorporate a pure hinge, something that's really good to help us with picking things up from the ground if they're heavy, so we can maintain a braced trunk and then use our legs to lift versus rounding when, say, we're picking up a pencil, something that we don't need to brace or be as strong for. All right, so you're going to have your feet about hip width apart, maybe shoulder width. You're going to push your hips back while maintaining a flat spine. Okay, kind of like we were doing with the downward dog. You want to keep that lordosis so you get a bigger stretch. You don't want to round your back as you do this. So keep that lordosis, you feel the stretch in your hamstrings, and then you reach forward. And then you come up and you squeeze your butt cheeks together. And you go back, feel the stretch, and forward. We're going to make 10 of these. 4, 5. Really focusing on maintaining a nice stable trunk. 6, 7, trying to keep your knees straight. 8, if they bend a little, that's okay as long as you're getting that hamstring stretch. 9, this is the last one. 10, I'm feeling pretty good already. But we're gonna move back down to the ground. We're gonna be doing a Bretzel. Now, if you haven't seen us or joined in when we've been doing a Bretzel, this is more of stretching a pattern of a movement, stretching rotation, stretching your hip flexors, stretching your pecs, stretching your neck on one side. It covers a lot of ground. And we're gonna use it today as our hip flexor stretch. So we used our hip flexors a little bit earlier with the little leg switches that we were doing. Uh-oh, here comes the dog. So we used our hip flexors with the leg switches. We told them when to turn on, we told them when to turn off. We've given some neural attention to that area. And now that they've been kind of worked a little bit, it's a great opportunity to stretch it. So we're gonna do a Bretzel, which is gonna look like half kneeling hip flexor stretch, but we're gonna be on our side. So to do this, here she comes. Hi, bud. To do this, you're gonna lay down on your side. You're going to have your bottom leg behind you. You're gonna grab your ankle. You're gonna grab your top knee with your bottom hand. And then you're gonna roll back. She loves me like a salt lick because I just went running. Oh boy. Hi, Frankie. Yes. Oh, I think your mom was gonna come get you. I think your mom is gonna come get you. I'm gonna pause this for 1 second. Oh, Frankie. Yeah, let's get that off there. Whoop. Anything can happen when you're live. All right, so we got Top knee is forward. You're grabbing it with your bottom hand. Bottom leg is grabbed behind you, and you're gonna roll your top shoulder back. So you're gonna be opening up your chest, opening up your pec, working on your thoracic mobility, but at the same time, your bottom hip is being stretched, your hip flexors and your quads. So we're gonna be here for 1 minute, just breathing deeply, trying to rotate back more and more and more with each breath. Focusing on nice, smooth, deep inhales and exhales. Oh, she's coming back. Hi, Frankie. We got 20 seconds left on this side, and then we're gonna switch sides. Fill those lungs, let it out, and just try to roll back just a little bit more at the last second. Okay, so we're gonna switch sides. You got your hips bent, knees bent, grabbing your bottom ankle with your top hand, grabbing your top knee with your bottom hand, and trying to roll that top shoulder back while pulling the bottom foot towards your butt. Started here. Got a nice view of the bushes we just cut back. Just relaxing into it. We're going to move on from this Bretzel stretch and head right into a pigeon pose to stretch out the back of the hip even more. We're hitting all those posterior structures in the hip, the legs, and the back, so we can make easier, more efficient spinal flexion, better hip flexion, stronger extension. And then we're going to add in some thoracic rotation, because the thoracic spine, if limited, can lead to increased stresses that go through the lumbar spine or the low back. So we've got to hit all this stuff. It's still low back day, even though it's an abbreviated one. We've still got to hit all the right spots here. So with the pigeon, you're just going to take one leg. You're going to try to get your shin perpendicular to your body. It's okay if it doesn't quite get there. We're all built a little bit differently. Like, my shin's never going to get there, despite how flexible I get. It's just not the way that my hip is shaped. But I can lean into my hip and keep my chest up, so I get all that stretch in my posterior hip. If I go here, I'm just going to be stretching out my lumbar spine, which, as we have learned today, is okay, except the focus of this stretch should be your hip. Like I said at the start of this, we're not trying to demonize any movement. We know that certain movements under load or with tons of repetition or for prolonged periods can be detrimental to the health of your back. But if you have control of them, you're less likely to get hurt. You're less likely to feel pain if you have ownership of those movements. It's the person who sits in a prolonged spinal flex position, doesn't work on their strength, and then tries to pick something up really heavy with that flexed position that might have an increased rate of injury. A couple more seconds here. We'll go about 15 more seconds. This is nice. Totally different vibe than in the gym. All right, and we're gonna switch. All right, chest up, perpendicular, and your shin, and just leaning into that hip. If this is bothering your knee for some reason, you can always pop onto your back and do one of these guys, a figure 4 stretch, or even just a piriformis stretch where you pull your knee up and over your body. But if you feel comfortable doing the pigeon, let's do it. You usually get a little bit more of an intense stretch that way. Chest up, leaning back, leaning into that hip, getting a nice stretch. And just breathing nicely into it. Nothing too crazy. As I always say, breathing is something you want to do again. And everybody has their sweet spot for a stretch. If someone's trying to force you into a specific position or shape with a stretch and you're not ready for it, there's a likelihood that you might actually get injured doing that stretch, and you're not going to want to do it. The whole point is to ease into it, work into it. As you get more flexible, more mobile, and stronger, you'll actually be able to express greater ranges of motion. You'll feel a little better. Okay, so here's a little test of my balance on this unstable surface. We're going to be working on that thoracic mobility that I talked about. We're going to be doing this with a lunge, so we're going to be opening up our adductors, using some of that hip flexion that we were just working on with your pigeon, trying to get your balance, working on your hip extension on one leg. So there's a lot going on here. So what you're going to do is you're going to step forward. You're on your toes in the back, so you're working on big toe mobility. We know that's important for hip and knee health. You're going to put one hand down. You're going to open up towards the sky, towards the ceiling. Bring that hand down and open up the other way. And when you open up away from your front leg, your balance is going to really be challenged. Step forward, you switch sides, you open up, other hand goes down, excuse my back. And then you're coming up, and we have 4 more on each side. So it's going to take a little bit of time. It doesn't matter the order you go in. It's kind of up to you. Mix it up. I think I got 2 more on each side. The rocks at work there. Last one on each side. All right. Ooh, that felt pretty good. Oh, I gotta grab my towel really quick. I asked you guys if you could grab a towel. This guy is pretty simple. All we're doing with it is putting it between our knees. Oh, hi, Frankie. So we're going to be putting this right between our thighs, between our knees. We're going to have our feet all the way together. And this is the last thing we're doing. Now maybe you've struggled to go down and touch your toes, smoothly be able to do it. Maybe you feel a big stretch. Ooh, I'm going to need a second after those lunges. Took my heart rate way up. But we're going to be trying to put your hips into a more posterior tilted position. Because a lot of times what happens is, if we're in a very, very, very anterior pelvic tilt position, we're putting our hamstrings on stretch already, and then we're going down to try to touch our toes, and we're not going to get anywhere that way. Okay, you're not going to express that range of motion. You're going to say, oh man, I can never, ever touch my toes. Well, that's because you're already putting them on a stretch. So taking the towel and squeezing it, squeezing and squeezing your butt cheeks and squeezing your thighs together, is actually going to take you from an anterior tilt to more of a posterior pelvic tilt, giving some slack into your hamstrings. So you're going to squeeze together. You're going to let your head relax. You're going to go down, push your butt back, and then come up. We're going for 10, and obviously, if you can't get down there, you can't get down there. But do your best to try to give yourself that posterior pelvic tilt, and then go down. So we're going for 10. And we're all done for today. Remember, try to push your hips back, kind of like we were doing with that hip hinge earlier. But now that you have a posterior pelvic tilt, you're going to be able to get down a lot farther. So we've worked on your hip hinge and flexion and extension of your spine. I think I got 4 more to go. I'm really squeezing my butt cheeks together, squeezing my thighs together. I got 1 left. All right. Okay. Very nice. So it was a quick one today, but we had a big focus on being able to get down and touch your toes, express spinal flexion, work on your hip flexion, because we do need to be able to take ownership of that movement. No movement is bad. There are bad applications of movements, there's bad applications of exercise, and there's not being prepared for a movement, as the physical therapist who I was talking with makes a great point. His name is Joe Gambino, DPT, or Joe Gambino PT. He's out in Astoria, New York. Worth checking out his stuff too. Seems like quite the great practitioner, has great information. Yeah, so he's all into being prepared for movements, and I couldn't agree more. And so it is time that we start preparing ourselves for some spinal flexion, because we do need it to pick things up, to pick our kids up, that kind of thing. We can't demonize it and just say, okay, you have to pick these things up like a robot every time. It's just not realistic. It is good if you can take the time and do those things, but sometimes, maybe you're at work and you're having to do transfers really quickly. I know some of the people watching have to do that. Doing it with that perfect deadlift, perfect squat form is just not practical. It's not reasonable. And so we need to make sure that we can prepare our spine, prepare our hips, prepare our legs for picking things up with that flexion. So we need to work up to it, obviously, and that's the gist of today's session. So hopefully there's some things that you choose that made you feel a little bit better, maybe helped you move a little bit better. Things that fit you really well. Everything else kind of, throw it to the side. We're just trying to make you feel better, to be healthier, and maybe things just need to be worked up to or progressed to a little bit easier. Hi, Frankie. And yeah, thanks for sticking with me and Frankie today. And you also got to see a little clip of my wonderful pregnant wife. Frankie, say bye to everybody. Bye, everybody. I'm actually going to check really quick, see if anybody had any questions. And then, this week is kind of going to be a pretty fluid week. We're going to kind of see how I'm feeling at the beginning of the week, or at the middle of the week, excuse me. And we'll do a hip and shoulder day, neck and shoulder day, and then Friday would be hips and knees. Quite a few people check in today. All right, guys. Well, it seems like there are not very many questions, but if you do have questions, please feel free to reach out to me at kinetic potential pt at gmail.com. You can also go into my direct messages. I love helping people. I love answering your questions. If you have family or friends that need help, please send them my way. Please look out for each other. Drink your water. Eat your vegetables. Get your sleep. And move as much as you can. And I will see you on Wednesday, hopefully, for a great neck and shoulder day. And I'll post what equipment you need tomorrow. So everybody take care. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you later.